Aloha. Wow, it is so awesome to be here with all of you. I hear this is the first year that AmFest has had people here from all 50 states. So we got some Hawaii in the crowd here. You know, time is the most precious thing that any one of us has to give. And so it means a lot that all of you have taken the time out of your lives to come and gather here today to address the very timely and urgent mission that we have before us. The future of our country is at risk, and we are the only ones that can save her. It's the Democrat elite and the permanent Washington establishment, the war machine made up of both Democrats and Republicans, who are abusing their power, undermining our God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution, with one goal and objective in mind: protecting their power at any cost. Now, every member of Congress and the U.S. Senate, they all took an oath. Every time they are elected, they go back and take that oath again. It's the same oath that I took when I was elected to Congress in 2012. It's the same oath that I took when I enlisted in the Army back in 2003. That oath that says, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The sad reality is that many of these very people who raised their right hand and said those words pose a direct domestic threat to the freedom of our country today. So we ask ourselves, how did this happen? How is it that we have people serving in the most powerful halls in this nation who are not only ignoring our Constitution, but taking actions directly to undermine it? Did they not actually read it? If they had, and don't take it for granted that they have, they would have recognized that our founders saw that power and liberty are natural enemies. They would have seen that our founders saw their most important task in framing our founding documents was to contain government power to protect individual liberty. Our founders understood that our unalienable rights and freedoms are not given to us by any government or individual. They are freedoms bestowed upon us by our Creator and are intrinsic to every single one of us. Our government's responsibility is to protect them. My first year in Congress was 2013. And around the time of Constitution Day, I got an email saying, hey, you're invited to come to the House floor to be a part of reading the Constitution into the congressional record. I thought, this is awesome. What a great tradition, so that year after year, we're reminded of that oath that we took and what it actually means. So I went down and participated in it. I didn't see very many of my Democrat colleagues there. And so later on, I went and talked to them, and I asked them, like, hey, this was really cool. I was stoked to be a part of this. Did you not get the email? The answer I got was quite condescending. They said, Tulsi, we know you're new here. You don't really quite get how this place works. We don't participate in that because that's a right-wing Republican thing. I was not only shocked, but pretty disheartened and saddened by that response. But now, as we look at their actions year after year and escalating, especially over these last few years, what they said is actually borne fruit. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the vision that our founders had for this country. They are so blinded by their hunger, this insatiable hunger for power, that they are putting their selfish interests above everything else. And they are launching this all-out assault on our God-given rights and freedoms. Something as simple as freedom of speech used to be something that most people from across party lines could agree was important. It's not the case anymore. We have the Democrat elite and their partners in the propaganda media and big tech who are threatened by a free people and a free society and doing all that they can to shut down our open marketplace of ideas, the public and virtual town squares, anywhere that we can debate our positions, sometimes with that fiery debate without fear of retribution or censorship. They're trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, our rights to defend ourselves and our loved ones, and our right to serve as a check on the power of a tyrannical government. They've made it very clear through the Biden-Harris administration the ATF is relentlessly trying to push rule after rule, circumventing the People's House in Congress to turn law-abiding gun owners like ourselves into criminals. They are discriminating against people of faith, especially Christians, arresting peaceful pro-life protesters, trying to remove God from every facet of our public life, and as we are seeing most recently, bending over backward trying to placate pro-Hamas Islamist protesters, either because they are Islamist apologists themselves or they're afraid of being called Islamophobes, and turning a blind eye to the ever-escalating levels of anti-Semitic attacks. These Democrat elite continue to violate our Fourth Amendment rights, our right to privacy and protection against warrantless search and surveillance, defending gross violations of our civil liberties by the secret FISA court in Section 702, supporting Department of Justice's weaponization of law enforcement against the Biden-Harris administration's political opponents. Now remember, during President Biden's inauguration speech, he promised to bring our country together, to be a president for all Americans, no matter who they voted for. And he promised to get us closer to peace. He has done the exact opposite on all fronts. He has torn our country apart, targeting anyone who didn't vote for him or dares to challenge his administration. He's racializing everything, turning Americans against each other, and putting us in a position where the world is on fire. We are on the brink of multiple wars and closer to nuclear catastrophe than ever before. These are just a few reasons why I left the Democratic Party. I could no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness. The party that I joined over 20 years ago, which was once a party that largely stood up for free speech, that stood up for working people in this country, that stood up for civil liberties, is gone. The bottom line is this: a political party that is actively undermining our constitutional freedoms cannot be trusted, and we, the people, cannot allow them to remain in power. So as we head into this next election year, which is coming upon us very quickly, beware. Because we're dealing with people who have no respect for the rule of law, who will undermine it for their own political gain, and willing to do anything. We should not be surprised if they declare new national emergencies that allow them to grab onto more power. We should not be surprised if they declare new unnecessary counterproductive wars of choice, whether cold wars or hot wars, to stoke fear and try to force us into submission, all in the name of national security. James Madison said, of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. He went on to say that no nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. He has been unfortunately proven right time and time again. not just by the Democrat elite who are in power, but the Republican neocons as well. We've heard just recently how Nikki Haley wants to further suppress our First Amendment rights because of national security threats, she says. And when you look at how our constitutional rights and liberties are suppressed during these times of war, how easily these Republican and Democrat neocons so easily throw out do this or else national security. I saw this in Congress. I was served there for 8 years on the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees and saw the abuses under the Patriot Act. So I introduced legislation to fix it. I worked with people like Congressman Tom Massey. We spoke out against these abuses, and guess what? On the House floor, Democrats and Republicans called us traitors. They said that by our actions to protect our civil liberties and argue we, the American people, should not choose between liberty and security, they said we were welcoming another 9/11-style terrorist attack on America. These are the people who are dangerous. These are the people who pose a threat to our democracy, our freedom, and our security. Now, we're seeing this start to play out with this ongoing proxy war against Russia at the expense of Ukrainian lives. They smear and censor anyone who dares to question, hey, maybe this is not serving our best interests. Maybe we should be looking at what is in the best interests of the American people. Now, we saw Matt Taibbi reveal a ton of evidence from Twitter about how our government, the FBI and Biden's White House, are directly pressuring Twitter to censor specific individuals because they didn't like what we had to say. Republicans in Congress took action. They introduced and passed legislation called the Protecting Speech from Government Interference Act, which did exactly what it sounds like. It prohibited federal officials from taking action to censor free speech on the internet. It doesn't get more basic than this. This is something every Republican and Democrat should have easily voted yes for. In the House, every Republican voted yes. Every Democrat voted no. And I want to give you this example of their hypocrisy and their danger. The reason they gave for voting no was that, well, the government has an important role to play in protecting us silly, naive, stupid Americans from disinformation. Who gets to decide what disinformation is? Well, of course, it's them. It's the Biden White House. It's the Democrat elite in the media and tech. You have Representative Daniel Goldman from New York, who said that his no vote was a stand for free speech and democracy, because they have to protect us from this disinformation from Russia and China. Well, what kind of disinformation? Well, like Hunter Biden's laptop, something they deemed as Russian disinformation because they didn't want us to see that before we voted in 2020. Biden's White House says they have to hold on to this power to counter domestic extremism. Trust me, they're not talking about the Islamist terrorist Hezbollah sleeper cells that we know exist in this country. They're talking about the so-called MAGA Republicans that President Biden has labeled as the greatest domestic threat in America. They're talking about the radical traditional Catholics who the FBI has pointed out pose a threat because they prefer traditional Latin Mass. They're talking about parents who Biden's domestic terrorism unit is targeting because they have the audacity to go and protest at a Board of Education meeting for parents' rights and against the irreversible mutilation of our kids in the name of gender-affirming care. And of course, the most egregious example of all that demonstrates how far they are willing to go to undermine the rule of law and our democracy is in the continuous assault and weaponization of the Department of Justice and law enforcement to go after President Biden's major political opponent in this election year. They are doing all that they can, and Special Counsel Smith has made this clear, to try to either throw President Trump in jail or do what it takes to prevent we, the American people, from having the choice ourselves to decide who we want to be our president and commander-in-chief. This is the kind of thing that we hear about happening in banana republics. This is not the kind of thing that we, the people, should accept as a new norm in our country. So as they're doing all of this, they are trying to create this culture of fear and hopelessness and self-censorship, that if they make an example out of a few people, they can get the rest of us to cower and fear in silence. They're targeting us for speaking up and saying, no, we must protect our freedom of speech. They're targeting us for having the audacity to say, we have to secure our borders. For targeting us for having the audacity to say that there is such a thing as a woman, and that there is no greater expression of hatred for women than to deny and erase our very existence. So, why are they doing this? They're worse than crazy. This is intentional. They are trying to make us afraid of them and their power, because deep in their heart of hearts, they know where the power lies. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of a free people. They're afraid of a free people who will lift our voices and lift our votes to stop them and take their power away. So as we look at this next year, let us never forget, even as those arrows come, as those attacks come, as those smears come, their fear is their weakness. Harry Truman once said, America was not built on fear. America was built on courage, imagination, and an unbeatable determination to do the job at hand. We've got a job to do, and it's a tough one. The Lord says, be not afraid. Our future is in our hands, and we've been given a no-fail mission by none other than the founders of this great country. They were talking to us when they said, we the people. They were talking to us when they reminded us that we are a self-governed nation, that those in government only have power with the consent of the governed. So there's a whole lot of people in Washington who need to be reminded who really has the power, but we only have power if we use it. Now, with all of you in this room and the many people who may be watching at home, we are not going to agree on every issue. We should have debates. We should bring our ideas to this open marketplace that exists uniquely in this country. Not be afraid of that. Our founders didn't agree on everything. They themselves had fierce debates, but most importantly, they stood together on the foundation of this country, as we must stand together now, bonded by our commitment to the fundamental founding principles of the United States of America, bonded together by our love for this great country and our appreciation for our God-given rights and freedoms in the Constitution. This foundation is under attack. I am deeply concerned for our future if the Democrat elite, I don't care whose name fills in the blank, are allowed to remain in power. It's up to us to defend our country and defend our freedom. Who we vote for matters. Being involved in this process matters. Yes, there are flaws and it needs to be fixed, but we can't fix anything unless our voices are heard. We have to elect leaders who are committed to supporting and defending the Constitution, putting the interests and the needs of the American people above all else. We will defend our freedoms by exercising them. We can uphold and protect the truth by speaking the truth to those who reject it. Be not afraid. When we are motivated by love for our country, love for the Constitution, love and respect for each other as fellow Americans and children of God, we will find that courage to do what we must to protect our future, to get us back on track. This is how we save our country. Be not afraid. By God's grace, we are free and we will remain free. God bless you all. Thank you so much. God bless America. Aloha.